Let's get the informed view on all of this from my next guest. He is lawyer Michel Drapeau, specializes in military law, and is a former Canadian Army colonel. Good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
What do you make of what's happened here today, the sudden decision by federal prosecutors to stay this charge against Vice Admiral Norman? What do you think they saw?
My reaction was I wasn't surprised. It was about time. I think what they saw probably...
Is that your phone? I hear a phone.
Yeah, it was mine.
Is that you? Okay,
yeah,
that's all right.
That's me.
That's okay, we can start over. Or if it's urgent, you need an answer. It's okay, that happens to me. Luckily, we're pre-taping. Imagine that if we were live. Okay, let's try that again. Well, let's get some informed analysis here from my next guest. Lawyer Michel Drapeau specializes in military law and is a former Canadian Army colonel. He's with me in the studio. Good to see you again. Thanks for being here to talk about this. Let's start with your reaction to this sudden decision today by federal prosecutors to stay this charge, criminal charge against Mark Norman. What do you think they saw that led them to this?
They couldn't make the point. They couldn't prove it. I mean, they admitted this much this morning. They didn't have a reasonable prospect of conviction. They didn't have the evidence, first and foremost. And second, they could not prove that Admiral Norman, whatever he was alleged to have done, had, and it's important to say it, he had a corrupt intent. In other words, there was a personal benefit of some sort he would receive.
Which is typically attached to a breach of trust trial. There's something you did it to benefit yourself.
A summer cottage, or in fact, quite the reverse. He did exactly that because he knew how pitiful the state of the Navy was. He knew as his previous appointment as commander of the Navy that it was an absolute necessity to undergo a naval construction program on a wide scale and as urgently as you can. Navy, I've never seen it in my 50 years association with the armed forces in such a poor state that it's been at the moment. So his intent was noble. And he was operating upon the direction that he had received from the previous government in the space and the schedule of construction and so on. When the new government came in with the obvious intent to reduce or to slow it down or to allocate funds in a different manner, of course he resisted that. Of course he spoke out. And of course he wanted to protect the construction schedule that had been agreed upon. That's probably the reason why he got such a robust pushback on the part of the government.
And that's interesting, right? I mean, so we don't know exactly what it is prosecutors saw today. The defense obviously knows, but said, they're now not associated with the case, so they have to be careful of what they say. The charge has been stayed, so they move on. But judging from what we heard, the language I think used around it was they said, there's what they said was they would not be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Vice Admiral Norman's conduct amounted to a serious and marked departure from the standards expected from persons in his role. So it makes me think, and I'm just speculating, and that's dangerous in a case like this, but did they see something that suggested, look, here's what was going on at the time in all of this. Everybody was saying stuff. Everybody was doing stuff to look out for different interests. And we can't hang it on this guy because he wasn't the only one doing this. Is that
having a criminal intent, having done in such a way, in fact, that he intended to cause harm.
And that's the key, right? A criminal intent.
Criminal intent. That's what it was, because it leads to a criminal conviction and a criminal sentence. So the bar is very high, and you have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And part of the evidence you got to bring to the fore. You have to show, in fact, it was a corrupted intent. He did it not by accident, not because he was sleepwalking, not because he slipped along the way. He had an intent, a formal intent to do that, and that intent was, in fact, not only illegal, but was corrupted.
You're a lawyer. When you look at this, I mean, it struck me today that this is a part of the story that can't be overlooked and can't be ignored, and that is this idea that the federal government is saying, look, we didn't launch the prosecution, and we didn't interfere in staying the charges. We had no role to play in any of this. But it's clear from what we know about the case that the government did play a role in, according to the defense, at least in slowly delivering documents, resisting the deliverance of documents. Are the government's hands clean in this?
No, they're not. From the get-go. I mean, the plaintiff in here was Scott Bryson. I mean, a member of cabinet. And for political reason, and he invoked cabinet confidences, and I think he was right in doing so. But that was the crux of the issue. And then the Privy Council Office, as well the Prime Minister's Office, have control over cabinet confidences of all sorts. And they were the one, in fact, who would provide or not provide or resist providing documentation to the defense in order to ensure is true and full defense. I mean, Admiral Norman was entitled to receive all of that. He asked, he had to put a motion, which was kind of rare, through a criminal proceeding to keep asking. The judge, just before he closed the trial this morning, said, over the past little while, I was reviewing all sorts of documents had been provided to her, not by the Crown, but by PCO, the Privy Council Office, for her to review to decide whether or not it would be disclosed. And she said that 2 days ago, she formed the opinion that these documents ought to be disclosed to both the Crown and the defense. I mean, so the Crown was not playing with a full deck of cards. The person playing with a full deck of cards was PSO, or PCO,
the government side.
and PMO, government side,
yeah,
totally.
It's interesting. I mean, they pointed out today that, including, I think, I remember the Crown prosecutor saying it as well, that look, the evidence that came forward, the Mounties hadn't seen as they pursued this case.
I mean,
federal prosecutors hadn't seen it. Now that they see it, they go, oh, there's no likely prospect of a conviction.
And if
here,
government
so
did not play an active part, it certainly played a passive part in a sense of resisting disclosure, which they did, and they made it difficult, they made it long, they made it expensive before, and they would only do so with spoons. We'll give you this document, that document, and the defense team had to go aggressively back to court time and again. They've also brought in senior officials to come and testify, including General Vance, and when he did, he brought 4 boxes full of documents with him that eventually were disclosed to the defense. I mean, this was more than pulling teeth for the defense to organize their defense.
Okay. Is he entitled to compensation for what's happened here, do you think?
I don't know if under the law, in fact, he's entitled to it.
I know he wants his job back, but
of course he does.
The government said today he's not getting it. We already have a vice chief of defense staff that's taken over from Mark Norman.
But that's not the only job that could be provided to him. There's a couple of other jobs that should be in the offing.
What's fair compensation here? Whether not just money, but what should happen to Mark Norman? He says he wants to go back to work.
I think, the law would say a return to the position he would have been in had this not occurred. And the position he would have been in, he would have been a 3-star second in command of Canadian forces, drawing salary, having the type of respect and the type of service that he provided to the nation and be recognized for it. That's what needs to be done. He doesn't need to do this in uniform. He can do it in a similar type of positions, and his skill set and his reputations and his experience will make him as a prime candidate for a number of other open positions.
Right. Michel Drapeau, always good to get your perspective. Thanks.
Thank you very much.